Men don't talk enough. That's what we hear. You know, men need to open up. We need to feel more. And we, as men, need to be vulnerable. And yeah, maybe on the surface, the way it looks, that could sound about right. But here's what nobody talks about. A lot of men have opened up. And it didn't go well. Maybe they were dismissed, misunderstood, told to just communicate better. Or worse, they were seen as weak. So what happens? The conversation stops. Not because there's nothing there, but because it didn't feel safe to keep going. So today, we're not doing the surface level advice. We're not repeating the same slogans and phrases we've heard over and over again. We're separating fact from fiction and actually talking about what helps. This is The Forge.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Welcome back, folks. This is The Forge. I am your host, Tyler Van Allen. And this is where we build something solid, right? Not through buzzwords, not through recycled advice, but through real conversation. You know that thing, right? Real conversation. Yeah, it might be foreign, right? Today, we're talking about men's mental health, and not the version you see online or that your girlfriend read in Cosmo, not the oversimplified version, the real one. Right? The one shaped by biology, by culture, by expectation, and by experience, right? Obviously this is a topic that's important to me because I am a man. And it infuriates me sometimes, especially when I hear quote unquote experts start talking and telling me about me. So as I started to craft this episode, man, I did a deep dive here, pulled in a lot of research articles, a lot of journals that I found online, and just kind of composed all of this information in one clean swoop. But before we get into it, I definitely want to acknowledge this. These statements are not to be taken personally by anyone, right? These are general averages of information. This is not a soapbox or a platform saying that women get it wrong and that a man's way is the right way. That's not what this is about. This is about bringing a little bit of education to the table so that not only can we understand maybe ourselves better, but we can actually have some real conversations with the people who support us every single day. So why is this happening to men? Well, before we start calling things right or wrong, we need to understand something first. Men and women, on average, do not always process the same way. And that doesn't mean one is better and another is worse. It's just that we process things differently. And a lot of men, we process things internally, meaning when something hits, whether it be stress, emotions, pressure, it really goes inward first, right? It does not go outward first in the way that maybe we think that it, quote, should, end quote. So from the outside, it can kind of look like nothing's happening for a man, but internally there's a lot going on. And here's where it kind of gets more complicated, right? So a lot of men, we don't have a strong automatic connection between what we feel and the words to explain it. And that's not because we suck at that. It's not, let me talk this out. It's more of a, let me sit with this. Let me figure this out first. Let me not say the wrong thing. And really, under stress, that gets even stronger because most men shift into a fight or flight response, right? Which really looks like pulling back, getting quiet, trying to solve it alone. And it's not because we don't care, but it's because that's how our system is wired to respond. And then you layer something else on top of that, right? How a lot of men were raised, right? Our rearing years as a child. Don't cry, handle it, be strong. So now you've got someone who feels deeply, processes internally, and was never taught how to translate that into words, right? Men from the start of our lives were kind of screwed from the beginning because I say to some of my clients and my vets and first responders sometimes, like, if you go to a gym and you see a guy working out, how can we tell if that guy is strong? Well, usually it's how much weight are they carrying? How much are they lifting? How many reps can they do before they just max out? And if we're talking about physical strength, wonderful. But if we're talking about emotional strength, that's actually the opposite, right? Emotional strength is not how much can we carry alone and just keep doing it over and over and over again. But sometimes society makes it feel that way. It makes us feel like it should be that way. So let's clear some things up, right? Why is this happening? As we said before, men and women, we don't process things the same way. If we go deeper to a little neurobiology behind it, men on average tend to have a stronger within hemisphere brain connectivity, right? Which means processing is more focused, it's more contained, and it's more linear. So it's almost like everything stays in one lane at a time, right? And women, again, on average, tend to have more cross-hemisphere connectivity. So there's more integration between emotion, language, social awareness, which allows for more real-time expression. So when something emotional happens, a lot of women can feel it, they can process it, and start talking about it almost at the same time. And that is a very general statement, right? All women are not like that, but by design, by nature, that tends to unfold. And a lot of men, we feel it. We go inward and try to make sense of it before saying anything. And now let's layer in something else. That connection between emotion and language, right? Men on average have less automatic linkage between those systems. So a man can feel something deeply and not have words ready, not because we're avoiding it, but because the translation process takes a little time. So instead of let me talk this out, it kind of becomes let me sit with this. Let me figure this out. Let me not say the wrong thing. And now let's add stress to that mix because this is where things really start to separate. When pressure hits, men are more likely to shift into a fight or flight response, which pushes things even more internal, right? The withdrawal, the get quiet, trying to solve it alone. While women, on average, not all, are more likely to move toward connection, communication, and co-regulation. And now let's take it one step further and look at where this comes from. So for most of human history, and if we look at it from an evolutionary perspective, men were responsible for hunting, protection, and responding to threats, right? And roles that really required focus, silence, fast decision making and emotional control under pressure, right? You don't survive danger by processing everything out loud. You survive by assessing internally, staying controlled, acting quickly, right? And so over time, you really get two different processing tendencies, with respect to men and women. Men, you get that internal part, you get that action oriented, and you get that contained. And with some women on average, you get that external expression, that relational expression, and it's very expressive. And then society kind of reinforces it too, right? Boys from a young age here, don't cry, handle it, be strong. And so the internal processing becomes even more internal. But here's where things have shifted and where this becomes a problem, in my opinion. We now live in a world that increasingly values immediate emotional expression. It values verbal processing, and it values open vulnerability. And those are inherently good things. They do matter. But here's the issue, right? We started treating that way of processing like it's the only healthy way. So now you have men who naturally process internally being told, if you're not talking, something's wrong. If you're not opening up fast enough, you're avoidant. And if you're quiet, you don't care. And that's dangerous. Because now you're not just misunderstanding men, you're mislabeling their process as dysfunction. So what really happens, right? Men start to feel misread. Men start to feel pressured. Men start to feel wrong for how they naturally operate. And when that happens, we don't move closer. We move further away. We shut down faster. We stay silent longer. We avoid spaces that feel like judgment. And the people trying to support us, they get frustrated because from their perspective, they usually feel like, hey, I'm trying to help and you're not meeting me halfway. But the truth is, both people are really trying. They're just speaking completely different processing languages. And if we don't understand that difference, we create a gap that keeps getting wider and wider and wider. And that's where the danger is, because now you have men feeling deeply, again, processing internally, not feeling understood, and slowly disconnecting. Not because we don't want connection, but because the way that we process isn't being recognized, right? Men aren't emotionless. We are often just processing where you can't see it. And if we don't learn how to meet that process, we don't just miss us. We lose us. We lose ourselves. So a cool little section here is I kind of want to get into like some facts versus fiction. Facts versus fiction as it relates to like men, right? Point of fiction number one is, we hear, men, we just don't feel as much, right? That is so not true. Men, we have the same emotional system, same brain structures, same ability to feel pain, stress, love, and loss. And some of the research I found actually shows that men actually experience emotional reactions just as strongly and sometimes stronger. So what's the difference? The difference is expression. It's expression. Because instead of saying, I feel overwhelmed, again, you might see silence, irritability, distance, and what could look like shutting down. And it's not because there's nothing there, but because there's too much there. And there's too much there with no clear way to express it. And if you really want to understand this, look at outcomes. Men die by suicide at significantly higher rates. Men are more likely to self-medicate. We're more likely to carry things alone. If men actually felt less, like that fictional piece, those numbers wouldn't even exist. Men don't feel less. they're carrying more of it alone. Point of fiction number 2. Men don't want help. Wow, men don't want help. Also, so not true. Men do want help. We just don't want help that makes us feel exposed, useless, or misunderstood, because for a lot of men, asking for help doesn't feel like relief. It feels like risk, like giving up control, like being judged, like being seen differently. So instead of avoiding help, we really just avoid bad help. We just avoid bad help because most men aren't asking, how do I talk about this? They're asking, what do I do with this, right? I'm not going to ask, how can I talk about this feeling? It's what can I do with this feeling? Give a man something structured, a direction, a plan, a purpose, and trust me, we'll engage. You see it everywhere. You see it in the military. You see it in first responders, in groups where there's shared struggle, even in gyms, garages, job sites. Put men in the right environment, dude, we'll open up. We'll stay consistent. We'll do the work. So the problem isn't willingness, it's fit, right? Men don't avoid help. We just avoid help that doesn't work. Point of fiction number 3. Men just need to be more vulnerable. We just need to open up more. And this one, it's tricky because there is some truth in it. I can't deny that. There's truth in that. But, the way it's usually said, it pushes us away. Because when a lot of men hear be vulnerable, what they hear or what they feel based on what they hear is expose yourself right now. Drop your guard immediately. Talk about everything you feel. And if it doesn't feel safe, our brain's going to shut down almost immediately. And that's not resistance, that's protection. Vulnerability doesn't come from pressure. It comes from safety. It comes from trust. It comes from respect. And I feel like a part that people miss is a lot of men show vulnerability before they ever say it. We show it by showing up. We show it by staying. We show it by letting you into our space. And we show it by admitting that we don't have it figured out, right? That is vulnerability. It's just not always verbal. And if you try to force it, you don't get honesty, you get performance. I don't feel like men heal because they're told to be vulnerable. We heal when vulnerability feels safe, right? Those were like the top 3 point of fictions that I came across, which was like, wow, like, how dare you? But I felt like it was important to address that, right? So with all of that said, what is the real problem? Folks, if you're enjoying the content so far, keep it locked. Coming very, very soon. It's still in the works, not too much longer to have to wait. The Warrior's Manual is a manual that is being created for you, for me, a tool that sort of lines up with this podcast. It is 3 months, a weekly manual for you to get some grounding tools that actually work and function. There's prompts, there's quotes, things to help you forge a path ahead. It's not a self-help book per se. It's not some cheesy book filled with lots of psychobabble worksheets. Just real stuff for real people who are looking to get to know themselves again, who are looking for a little bit of clarity and ways that they can help themselves and put some of this weight down. So coming soon, our website is currently being built as we speak. The Warrior's Manual will be on Amazon. There's going to be hard copies It'll be available right through our website. We also have a digital copy. So for me personally, I love the hard copy. There's something about putting pen to paper that really is just very grounding. But for those of you, we have a digital copy that's going to be available. You can pull that right up on your phone, right up on your iPad, on your computer, and you can actually work through it in that sense too. So keep it locked. Definitely we'll have more information to come on the Warrior's Manual. Thanks so much. Here's the part we really don't talk about enough. A lot of men were set up with a very specific blueprint, very specific, which is to be strong, handle it yourself, provide, perform, and produce. And that over time becomes identity, right? So when things go wrong, it's not just stress, it's not just pain. It feels like I'm failing at who I'm supposed to be. And dude, that's heavy. That is heavy. Because now it's not just emotion, it's identity on the line. Our identity is on the line. So what does our system do? It protects itself by withdrawing, by shutting down, by getting angry, by numbing out, or by overworking, right? And that's not dysfunction, that's protection. But often that protection becomes pretty dysfunctional pretty quick. So I'm just going to speak it from my perspective, but what do men actually need? What do men actually need, right? And I think it's going to be different for all of us, of course. But let's try to simplify it, because I don't think it has to be that complicated. Most men, myself included, I really need three things, right? First, I need respect. I don't need agreement. I need respect. I don't need to be talked down to. The people that support me, they don't want to be talked down to. Why would I want to be talked down to? And I don't need someone to assume that I'm emotionally unaware. I just need them to meet me where I'm at, right? So yeah, that first one, respect. I need respect. And second, I need structure. I need structure. I need a clear direction. I need frameworks. I need steps. Because a lot of men are asking, what do I do with this? Not just how do I feel about this? So that framework, that structure, I find that to be helpful. I find it to be helpful when I'm allowed time to try to figure that out first on my own, without pressure and without judgment. And I mean, of course, that gets a little tricky. But, I was asking my wife the other day, I said, I'm doing this episode on men and mental health. And I said, you and I, we've been close for a long time. We've been married for a long time. Like, what is something that you have noticed in me that, would be helpful for other partners to understand? And she said, like, in 2.5 seconds of me walking in the door or just seeing me, she said, I have literally already kind of sized you up. I know I may not know what's happening. I may not know what you're thinking and feeling, but I know that your gears are turning. And she used that word, gears are turning. And she said, what I tend to do is, I may just be like, so you good? What's going on? And, oftentimes it's met with, no, I'm fine, and that fine might just mean like, I really don't even know how to put this into words, or I really don't actually know how I'm feeling right now, but I just know that something feels heavy. Right. And she said, what I often do is I just let you go and process, right? If you're downstairs in your studio, if you're out in the grass, in the yard piddling around, if you're tinkering on your motorcycle, whatever, like I let that process play out, because she said she just felt like that's something that I've always needed, not just this forced conversation. And my next question to her was like, well, how do you know when I'm not working through that process effectively? And she said it's really, for her, she said it's really just kind of like continued respectable monitoring. And I'm like, respectable monitoring? Like, what is that? And she's like, well, I might just pop my head in and be like, hey, can I get you something? And she's like, and depending on your reaction, I can kind of tell if you're working through it. I can kind of tell if maybe you need a little more time. In other words, she's kind of saying, I'm really just checking to make sure that you're safe, right? I'm making sure that first your time is respected, your process is valued. And I'm like, okay, that's pretty cool. Gave her a big hug and a kiss, and I'm like, thanks for doing all that. I didn't even tell you to, but you're right on point. But then she said, obviously, when things come and she notices that I'm a little stuck in a process, she'll say, I just kind of gently will ask, do you want to talk about what I'm processing? Do you want to talk about maybe what you kind of feel like right now, whether it's right or wrong? And honestly giving me safety to just kind of that agreement that, like, there's no wrong answer here, right? Just start kind of spitting out whatever comes to your mind. And honestly, it's really helpful sometimes because I don't know. I don't always know. Or I do know, I just don't quite know a solution. So yeah, I just thought that was interesting. We have been together for many years, and she does know me well, and she knows I am complex. She's complex. We're both complex individuals. And I think, I thought that was just really powerful to just be like, wow, I'm respecting you enough to give you a little bit of time. But you're still my guy. So I'm still checking on you, without force, without judgment. And to be honest, that is what feels safe, right? Not even realizing it before she said it. That makes me feel safe. That makes me feel free of judgment. Therefore, I do want to just take shots in the dark with it sometimes and be like, hey, I'm just going to hash this out and see where it goes. And, maybe input is required, maybe it's not from her, but the safety piece is a big one. And, another thing I feel like men really do need is a sense of brotherhood, right? And I don't know if that is like from an evolutionary perspective. I really don't have many thoughts about it other than the fact that I do agree with it, right? In a sense of brotherhood, right? So, for example, me and my ice hockey team, we're talking, we're not just venting, and we're certainly not just asking for sympathy, but it's like this real connection. Sometimes it's just feeling like our life experiences are shared, right? Maybe it's the same plot, but a different story, right? And sometimes it's just honest feedback. But I think most importantly, that brotherhood has some built-in accountability, right? Some very real built-in accountability. And I think that's where change kind of happens. I'm going into the locker room early in the mornings and I get that question, hey, bro, how's your week going? I'm like, oh, man, it's like such a hard week. And they're like, oh, yeah, man, I get it. I feel that too, right? And let's just try to keep it going. What can I do? It's a shared experience. It makes you feel like you're not alone. And that's really important. And I think, truthfully, there's a shift that needs to happen, right? The goal isn't to turn men into someone we're not. It's not really strength into weakness. I think the shift is like rigid strength should become flexible strength, right? Strength that kind of includes awareness, control, adaptability, and connection, right? We don't want to lose our edge. We want to gain control over that edge. That's the difference, right? I'm not looking to become someone I'm not. I'm looking to be more in control with how I process, right? That's a big difference. I don't want to change. I like who I am. Um, I'm almost 40 years old. Like, my process has gotten me through a lot of things in life. So it's not that it's broke. It's just that I just need a little control over it sometimes, right? I just need a little control. I think sometimes when I've had some friends in relationships and they're arguing, right? And oftentimes, especially in those judgments, I call it the slinging mud, right, back and forth. Like, maybe the female partner says, like, you just never talk to me. And then, the male partner might be like, well, you just talk all the time. And, that slinging mud is not really beneficial. Duh. I mean, it's really not. But really what's happening is that we as people, we aren't born with the translational language. No one sets us down and says, hey, here's how you translate that cognitive processing. No one does that. Like, nobody. That's kind of information that you have to dive in and find yourself. And especially it's like partner specific, right? I mean, there are some women out there that are super internal processors. This is all just very general information. There are some men, my wife considers me to be a very emotionally sensitive man. Is that because I grew up in a household with 4 women and my dad was the only other male? I mean, maybe that exposure to that processing has made me more emotionally aware. I don't know. But yeah, no one teaches us these things. So it is our responsibility to kind of bridge that translational gap, right? So these, again, we could do like a whole series on men and mental health. This is really just some things that I felt like was kind of good to address, good to get our gears turning, good to get our gears going and come up with some ideas. But I think that, like, honestly, so many men who don't feel supported, sometimes it's not that people don't want to support us. It's not that our partners don't want to support us. We just have different processing languages, and that is okay. But that processing language for men is definitely a barrier that prevents us from getting help, that prevents us from honestly getting the right kind of help. And that's something that has to change, right? That's something that has to change. And I think you combine that with some of our careers and our jobs and the type of careers and jobs, and especially veterans, first responders, active military that are men. Our job doesn't require emotions. I mean, not in that way. Honestly, one of my good buddies who's a cop is like, you start feeling emotions, you're dead. And he's not wrong. But it's not that you're not feeling it. It's just that once the badge comes off, once the uniform comes off, how can I start tapping into that process that moves things along in a healthy way? And more importantly, how can I kind of tell my people the best way that they can support me, right? And it might be that conversation, right? Sometimes when I come home from work, like, I've got 10 minutes on the drive, and I am kind of taking a personal inventory of, like, where am I at emotionally? How much capacity do I have? Because if I show up and I don't tell my wife where I'm at mentally, or at least minimally just be like, wow, like, I've got no capacity right now, she doesn't know. And then there's this expectation of, well, you have no idea what I've gone through. So the expectation is, well, if you haven't at least told me what your capacity is, then I'm have an expectation for you to be this type of partner right now. And that's like, how many times have we crashed out as men where we walk in the door and our partner's like, hey, what do you want for dinner tonight? You know, I was thinking this and this. And we're like, oh my God, like I just can't take it. It's not that they're being annoying. It's that we have not connected enough with ourselves to at least know where our capacity is. And that's a huge thing. That's a huge thing. You don't have to label it, but at least just, use some type of metaphor if it helps, like if my emotional fuel tank is inside of me, is it half full right now? Is it 3/4 full? Is it a quarter full? And if I at least know how full that feels, then I know what else I can take on. And I don't have to crash out about it. Some important things to think about. Some very important things to think about. So, kind of in conclusion, I want you to think about something out there if you're listening to this. I want you to think about something. I want you to think about one thing in your life that you've been carrying alone. I don't want you to try to fix it, and I don't want you to try to solve it. Just something you're carrying. That's sort of the nail that's going into the beam today, right? It's what are you carrying alone? Something that you're not fixing and you're not solving it. You're just carrying it, right? Today's nail is really for that shared weight. It's for that reminder that strength really doesn't mean isolation, right? And that's not weakness, right? That's structure. That's structure. What we're talking about today is structure. Our cognitive processing structures is different. I had a friend one time who was a chef in a restaurant, and he always used to make new menu items, and he would let me try them. And I remember one time, I don't remember what it was, but he said, T, try this. Tell me what you think. Took a bite of it, and I was like, this is not good. And he said, no, it's not that it's not good. It's just that you don't like it, or your palate just doesn't understand it. And I think if more people in the world started to think about that in terms of how men feel and process emotions, we might have a little bit more of a fighting chance. It's not that I suck at feeling emotions. It's not that I suck and am not good at communicating. It's just my process. You don't understand it and you don't have the palate for it, and that's okay. But let's just kind of educate ourselves a little bit, right? Let's warm up to that palate and get to understand it and get to appreciate how that process works. So honestly, in closing, men's mental health isn't broken. It's misunderstood. It's misunderstood. We don't need to become someone else. We need systems that actually work for how we're built. We need a system built on respect, on structure, on brotherhood, on education. That's where change happens. And that's where men will start staying. Thanks so much, everybody. Take care of yourselves. The more that you take care of yourself, the more that you can actually show up and take care of other people. Thanks so much. This is The Forge. Social media isn't a replacement for therapy. And while I am a therapist, I am not your therapist. Please reach out to your local resources or call 988 if you are in crisis. This is educational content only, not therapy or a replacement for it. Rather, a little education for you along your way, along the journey. In chaos will thrive.